Cheating wife who abandoned me during my hospitalization now seeks forgiveness after 12 long years. Hi, I'm Jason, M47. I want to share my life incident here to get some advice. This goes back to 12 years ago when I was married to Susan, my first wife. I was married for 7 years and had 2 children, Laura and Lucas. They were 5 and 3. Then we were leading a regular life until one fateful day. One morning when I was driving to my office, a speeding vehicle from the opposite direction rammed into my car. The next thing I remember is waking up on a hospital bed, covered in bandages and plasters. The nurse informed me that I had woken up after 2 days in a coma. I held my doctor's hand and thanked him for saving my life. I was grateful for the new life. But little did I know about the disaster that was about to unfold. After a week of my treatment, my doctor informed me that my lower body was paralyzed and I might never be able to walk again. I was shattered. Susan broke down at this news. It was evidently difficult for her because she had to manage the house and the children in all aspects. I fell into depression, unable to comprehend my life in a wheelchair. I spent my days staring at the empty walls of my hospital room, cursing how my life had turned upside down. I dreaded how I would never be able to play soccer with my children, how I would never be able to dance with my wife, and how I would never be able to be free again. To add to my miserable life, Susan stopped visiting me in the initial days of my stay. She brought the children to see me 3 times a week. The moments I spent with my family were the only ones I lived for. But as the days passed, her visits became scarce. I pleaded with her to get the children to visit me, but she would say that the children didn't want to meet me. So often, I felt hopeless. Then one day, she handed me the divorce papers, saying I definitely can't spend my life with a handicapped man. I'm still young and desirable. I deserve a normal man. I would be lying to say that I didn't sense that coming. I sniffed the upcoming separation when she started giving me cold shoulders, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. A month after my accident, some of my friends informed me that they had seen Susan loitering around hand in hand with a middle-aged man, probably someone in his 50s, in cafes and malls during the evenings and on weekends. Some claimed that she had an affair even before my accident, and some said that her desperation got her into a fat, grumpy old man. After my accident, it was barely 2 months later that I was yet to be discharged and was handed divorce papers. I might be sounding calm while writing this, but I was none of it back then. I was flustered, devastated, and heartbroken. I was wheelchair-bound, destitute, and divorced with no income or savings. After paying for the household expenses and children's education, savings were off the radar. Luckily, I had insurance that covered my hospital bills to an extent. I had to liquidate my savings for the remaining expenses. So in the end, I was left with nothing. I wanted to yell, smack my head against the wall, and curse my fate. I don't know how I upheld myself back then, but something inside kept me sane. Probably the fire of taking revenge. After being discharged, I shifted to my parents' house. I was 35, divorced with no income, and dependent on my old mother, physically and financially. My mother was a florist. She ran a small shop in the suburbs. The little income from the shop and the pension money kept her expenses afloat. With those limited resources, she offered to support me. It was the most troubling feeling for a 35-year-old man to depend on a 62-year-old mother. Soon after my discharge, I went to meet my children. When I reached my house, it was locked. The neighbors told me Susan had shifted to her lover's house with the children. According to my neighbors, Susan's lover was a fat old man who had been divorced thrice, but was filthy rich and had no children. Some even labeled Susan a gold digger and cheapster for sleeping with a grumpy old man for his fortune. I managed to get the address of her boyfriend and reached his house. When I arrived at Susan's new home, she didn't let me meet my children, saying that they had already adjusted to her boyfriend and apparently called him Daddy. She said that my sudden appearance would confuse them further. She threatened me with a restraining order. When I insisted on meeting my children, I didn't have a penny to spend on a lawyer. I was surviving on my mother's meager income, so I backed off. It was less than 6 I kept staring at her, contemplating my 7 years of married life with that woman who replaced me with another man. In a few months, I left the place with teary eyes. I went back home feeling defeated by the humiliation. I cried like a 5-year-old in front of my mother, who consoled me. She motivated me to take charge of my life. I was clueless about my life. I was directionless to start with. I joined my mother in her shop. I helped her make bouquets, serve the customers, and clean the shop. Soon, I realized that the business had huge potential to grow, but my mother was too fragile to do it herself. I pulled out my old contacts to secure contracts with event management companies to supply flowers at the events. Gradually, I built a team and took contracts for venue decorations, and eventually launched my own event management company. It took me 12 long years to rebuild my life for myself. My mother had my back all these years. She supported me and motivated me to bounce back. A year after my accident, I learned Susan was leaving the city with my children and her lover. I rushed to the house to meet my children, but they had already left by the time I reached. Before that, I tried to reach out to my children multiple times, but Susan insulted me and chased me away. Every time, Susan had full custody of the children and could decide everything for them. Since I was physically and financially challenged, I could not contest joint custody. I couldn't challenge her restraining order because I was too broke to hire a lawyer, whereas Susan had a wealthy boyfriend, Evan. I didn't know if he was already with her before my accident, and if not, how he suddenly appeared in Susan's life. All I knew was that he was a wealthy man with ample ancestral property. In the last 12 years, whenever I got any leads on my children, I traveled to meet them, but failed every time. Susan threatened to get me arrested, as her boyfriend had the money and contacts to get away with anything. By the way, that man didn't marry Susan. Even after 12 years, although they lived together, a year ago I finally filed for joint custody. I was waiting eagerly for my event management business to get stabilized. I filed for custody and finally managed to get 15 days. They are flying next week to my house. Although Susan did her best to object to my plea in court, I hired a good lawyer who presented my case well, and I got 15 days. Besides, my children are grown-ups now, and they were asked if they wanted to meet me, and affirmed a yes. I know I can't compensate for the lost 12 years, but I wish to spend quality time with my children as the time is nearing. I am feeling nervous and delighted at the same time. They are 17 and 15. Now, I know teenagers are demanding these days. I hope that my children are not mean and toxic to the extreme. I don't know what story Susan has told them in the last 12 years. And should I tell them the truth about their mother? I don't know. Do you guys have any suggestions on this? How do I approach them? I'm super nervous and super excited. Update 1. Hi all, I have quite an update. I missed 2 critical pieces of information in my original post. First, about my current wife, Amy. Yes, I remarried a beautiful woman 5 years ago. Amy is an interior designer. I met her at an event where she was designing the wedding venue and we were providing the flowers. I was yet to start my own company at that time. It wasn't love at first sight, but we vibed well. We kept meeting for such events in the next few months and became friends. She was a single mother of a 3-year-old daughter. The idea of starting the event management company was hers because she worked for one of the companies for many years and had the contacts and knowledge of the business. I partnered with her to launch the business. We dated for a year before getting married. Now we live as a happy family of 4. Amy, her daughter Mia, my mother and I. Her daughter was delighted to get a granny, and so was my mother. The second piece of information was regarding accident compensation. I was hit by a speeding truck, so ideally I should have been compensated by the logistics company owning the truck. But at that time, the company got away with paying nothing by manipulating the facts about the accident and pinning the blame on me. I could not hire a good lawyer back then, so I didn't get a penny. You know how big companies work. They pay in bombs to their attorneys to save their backs. After my marriage with Amy, she suggested I refile the case since we could afford a suitable lawyer. The case is still in court, but my lawyer has given us a positive hint that the judgment would come in our favor. I tried to break the ice and ask them about their school life and city. I deliberately skipped the conversation regarding their mother. They too didn't bring her up. The children were unusually silent, or maybe looking for an opportunity to plug into their earphones like any other teenager. Upon reaching home, we were welcomed by Amy. The children looked shocked, as if they didn't anticipate this coming. I don't know why Amy was a surprise to them when their mother could live with another man within months of our divorce. Why can't I remarry? Amy had set up the guest room for the children. We had lunch together, and Amy laid out the vacation itinerary we had planned for the family. They gave a neutral reaction to everything. Neither were they excited, nor did they dismiss the plan. Amy and I were confused by their mixed response. They locked themselves up in their room, and soon after that, I got a call from their mother, Susan, accusing me of tricking our children. She said I brought the children to my house, so Amy and I could manipulate them. I felt disoriented by her behavior. She accused me of hiding the truth about my marriage. I wondered about her accusations. I hung up on her, but she persistently called me. I decided to address the elephant in the room. I called my children and asked them what was the matter. After the initial hesitation, they spoke up. They were mad at me because it was said to them that I had abandoned them. Susan had brainwashed the children against me and had filled their heads with all lies and deceit. I revealed to them the exact truth. It was not me. Their mother jumped to another man as soon as she got the opportunity. They were kids back then. Yet, they remember those incidents very well. I told them how Susan disappeared with them to the old man's house and how she had threatened and chased me away. Whenever I tried to contact them, I showed them the restraining letter and all my rejected pleadings I made to meet them. They were in tears and regretted believing in their mother's lies all these years. My younger son, Lucas, admitted that once he tried to reach out to me on social media, but Susan caught him. She emotionally blackmailed him and took a promise from him that he would never contact me again. The children also admitted to having been rebuked by Susan's husband. Susan and the children were mistreated at family gatherings because they were unmarried. Susan continued to stay as a mistress in his house. Although the man paid for their education, he was never a fatherly figure to them. My heart ached as I got to know about my children's adversity. After all the truths came out, we hugged each other and cried our hearts out. We went for a week-long vacation in Florida and had a great time together. Laura and Lucas bonded with Amy and Mia, who was turning 8 this year. I couldn't be happier seeing all my family together. My children uploaded our group photos on social media, captioning them "Happy Family." As soon as Susan saw those photographs, she called them up and berated them for their foolish behavior. She blamed them for betraying her by bonding with us. She texted me, threatening that she would not let me meet my children further. If I did anything to turn them against her, I laughed at her hollow threats and continued with our vacation. After returning from the vacation, my children met with my relatives. My relatives happily hosted them, and I was delighted to see the old bonds rekindled. When they were about to leave, they promised to keep in touch. Despite Susan's threats, they said that they felt suffocated living in that house and that they would move back with me once they completed high school. I hugged them and bid goodbye. After going back, they confronted Susan about her evilness, but she turned the tables on me, accusing me of manipulating them against her. It's been a few months since they returned, but we talk regularly. I hope to have them back with me. I'll update you if anything develops. Thanks a lot. Update 2. Hey all, I know it's been a long time since I updated. There's been a lot of drama in the last 6 months. After my first meeting with my children 3 months ago, the impending court case with the logistics company got settled. Guess what? I got hefty compensation not only for the accident, but for the injustices in the first trial. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the initial trial, but the logistics company whose truck rammed into my car manipulated the case and pinned the blame on me for the accident. Hence, I was not compensated at all. I appealed it again at my wife's suggestion and won this time. I gave the news to my children, and they were equally elated. They wanted to meet me, and I promised to have them back with me permanently. A month later, Susan showed up at my office. She held my hand and asked me for and instead keep her as the mistress because he didn't want to share the inheritance with my children. Susan agreed to his terms because he promised to feed and fund their education. I asked her why she didn't get a job. She said she had never worked and was unsure if she could earn a similar lifestyle, which her lover gave her for free. She kept saying that she did everything to protect the children's future. She stood her ground, saying that the children would have grown up in poverty if she didn't take that step. I got so annoyed at her nagging that I yelled at her, saying she could have at least given me a chance to bounce back if she was so concerned about our children's future. She should have discussed that with me, instead of jumping to conclusions and deserting me without any heads up. I clarified that I had moved on and her pleadings didn't matter. She recounted all those happy moments we shared, like our wedding day, the birth of our 2 children, etc. I shrugged her off, saying I was a different person now and all those memories had faded away. They didn't mean anything to me. She crossed the line by saying she and my children were my original family, not Amy and Mia. She said that Mia was not my daughter and that I could never have a proper family with Amy and Mia. I felt disgusted by her cruel mind. She insisted that I take her back so the real family could reunite. I made it clear to her that I love Amy and Mia and they are my real family, not her. She refused to leave my office, creating a scene. She left only when I threatened her with the police. I went back home and narrated this to my mother and Amy. Amy was naturally distressed by this, but she is a mature woman and didn't make a deal out of it. My mother said that she never liked Susan because of her selfishness. Mom even said that Susan had returned to me only because of the money I had received after the court settlement. That woman is indeed a gold digger. When my children learned about their mother's behavior, they berated her and told her to stay in her lane. I'm not sure how her sugar daddy got to know about this incident, and he had threatened to throw her away if she tried to reach out to me next time. I couldn't be more thankful to him. The latest update is that my children are moving in with me this month. They would stay with us briefly before I put them in a nearby college. They wanted to enjoy their college life and stay at a hostel. I believe we should remain connected, but at the same time give ourselves some space to get to know each other. The children have abandoned Susan, and in the end, she is left with nothing but her sugar daddy. I hope she gets to enjoy the sugar until it turns sour. Haha. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.